for direction,
Yeah.
prioritisation. I mean, how many organisations do you hear say we'd be so much better if we did a fewer things better?
Yeah.
Well, clearly, one of the roles of leadership is to decide what those fewer things should be.
Yeah.
There can't be a business, or very few businesses in the country, that aren't looking hard at costs. Part of leadership's job is to say, which costs should be cut, but equally, which costs do we need to maintain despite the challenging economic climate.
So keeping an eye on the longer term as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, costs that are associated with training and talent development, costs that are associated with climate change, certainly in our company, we would have to, the circumstances would need to deteriorate a lot further before we started cutting on those.
Yeah, yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. There's all the pressures of being a CEO. How do you stay grounded and fresh every day, given that you've got shareholders,
You
regulators?
assume I do stay grounded.
Yeah, that's true.
Personally, I don't find staying grounded too difficult. I think there is a risk, and we've seen it in politicians and in business people, in believing your own PR.
Yeah.
And I've seen very capable people go off the rails because they've fallen for that.
Yeah.
So I think a stable family life is really important, and certainly my wife and daughters keep me grounded.
Yeah.
I think trying to prioritise your life and understand what is really important, genuinely important, helps you grounded, because it's very easy in the pressures of day-to-day business life to lose sight of some of that.
And when we talked before, you talked about the 5 Fs.
This came from a session that I had in an undergraduate business school in northern Romania a few years ago, when I was asked the question, how do you prioritise your life? And I answered it, as you know, in terms of my 5 Fs, which are faith, family, fitness, fun, and firm. I think the only thing that's more important than your family is your faith.
Yeah.
Family would be second. I think if you've got those two things, what's really important is your health. So for the benefit of my alliteration, that's fitness.
Yeah.
If you've got that, actually enjoying what you do, I think is enormously important. So that's my fun. And firm is career.
Yeah.
So although I'm very committed to what I do and spend an enormous part of my life doing it, in terms of my job, there are 4 things that are actually more important.
Yeah.
So that I don't say I manage every day to prioritise my life accordingly.
Yeah.
But that would be my aspiration.
Yeah. And staying fresh. I mean, is that the centeredness that you have?
Yeah, I think another character. Going back to your earlier question about characteristics of leadership. I mean, I think energy is one of the important things. And I had a nickname in a couple of companies that I've worked in. And actually, if this interview is seen, it might come into my current company, but they call me Duracell, because one of the things I do have an ability. I have plenty of weaknesses, but one of the things I do manage to have is a high level of energy. Yeah. So staying fresh isn't
it's not an issue.
Despite the pressure of the job, isn't an issue for me.
And another point I was interested to talk to you about was the fact that you've worked in a leadership role cross industries. Mm-hmm. What are your learnings from doing that? Because only a few CEOs have gone cross industries in the way you have.
Yeah, I first of all, I didn't consciously set out to work in 3 or 4 or 5 different industries, and secondly, I wouldn't say it is better or worse than spending your whole career in a single industry. I think there are pluses and minuses like in everything. I will never know an industry in the same depth as somebody who spent 25 or 30 years in retailing or in shipbuilding or whatever it happens to be. But what I do have is a range of perspectives and experiences that somebody who's only spent 25 years in retailing will never have. Yeah. And an ability to see common trends, common issues. And I mean, my last 2 companies, both being CEO, one of a very highly regulated utility, one in running the 2nd or 3rd largest container shipping business in the world, listed in Holland. instinctively you would think those are two very different businesses. Of
Mm.
course they are in terms of what they do. But I tell you, many of the issues that I deal with are exactly the same.
Yeah.
And I've benefited from understanding and seeing those parallels.
Yeah. No, I can see that. And then when you're talking about your career, is there a single or a couple of magic moments that where you really, you know, that you look back with a lot of pride on? Not that you've finished yet, of course.
Of course. No, I think the magic moments are when you see a group of people, particularly a group of people that you've put together,
Yeah.
perform at the upper end of expectations.
Yeah.
I inherited a container shipping business that was in a really difficult situation, losing money, losing market share. We put together a new management team, and within a couple of years, we were making a substantial amount of profit, increasing market share, and we ended up selling it at a great price for the shareholders. I got a very high level of satisfaction and motivation from that.
Yeah.
I put together a team here at United Utilities. 7 of my 9 direct reports are new, either internally promoted or from outside. And I mean, small things and very industry centric, but we've managed to hit our leakage target for the last 2 years. Prior to that, the company missed it every year for 5 years.
Yeah.
We've got a customer service measure that had never been above 50% for as far back as we could look. It's now consistently 75-80%.
Yeah.
Not where we want it to be, but dramatically better. When you achieve things like that, having put a team together,
Yeah.
that's where I get my satisfaction from.
It goes back to your definition of leadership, isn't it, in terms of common aim?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then any advice, I mean, is there advice you wish before you'd taken up some of these CEO roles for people, you know, about to step up to become CEOs?
I think one thing I always tell younger people is work really hard at understanding what you want to do. In a sense, it doesn't matter what you want to do. What matters is you have your own personal objective, and what's right for you is different to me, and it's not better or worse, it's just different. And I get very frustrated when I see people go through their career without really defining what they want.
Yeah.
If what you want is to be a chief executive, then I think to work for or with somebody for whom you have great respect is a great opportunity and a great privilege.
Yeah.
And trying to engineer that
Yes.
would be a piece of advice.
Yeah, because I think a number of people have mentioned, you know, that there are relatively few truly great 21st century leaders, but if you could work with one, you know, what an opportunity.
Absolutely.
From an experience point of view.
Yeah.
And mentoring.
The problem is when you're younger, you don't necessarily recognise that.
Yeah.
But no, to have an opportunity of working for
Yeah.
one of the great CEOs would absolutely be a priority if that's what you aspire to be.
Yeah. But really, you're saying, you know, work out what you really want to do, get the experiences rather than focus on career building too much.
I think having a long-term career plan is actually futile.
Yeah.
Because things will happen in your private life or your professional life that change.
Yeah.
I think you need to have 1 or 2 stakes in the ground
Yeah.
in terms of direction. But in terms of planning, I wouldn't go beyond that.
Yeah.
I plan for the next few years, absolutely,
Yeah.
3 to 5 years. But to try to have a plan for 20 years, I think is futile because things will inevitably change.
Yeah.
But you do need a few stakes in the ground.
Yeah.
And what you really need is the value system that we talked about earlier on, firmly embedded.
Yeah. Okay. And then finally, as you know, we're doing the whole book is about the secrets of CEOs. Is there a particular secret or points of view you'd like to share, Phil? Anything else?
I think it comes back to leadership. And I think it's just fundamental to understand what leadership is and what it means, and that it is different to management. It's a different skill set. You need both, but they're 2 different hats. And to really understand what's important to leadership, what are the characteristics of leadership, what does an organisation need? I think, and I have to say, it's only in the last 10 or 15 years that I've really begun to understand this, and I absolutely wouldn't set myself up as a model or a paragon of virtue either.
Yeah.